Today, we become legends.
Today's Titan Talk had some minor spoilers for the OB19 update and the schedule for the rest of the week's reveals, as well as having the lead programmer on the show to discuss technical questions about the game. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you don't want to miss my future recaps of all the big news coming out this week, but without further ado, let's jump in. So first up, Kilgun went over the schedule for this week, as a lot is going on. Wednesday will be the main OB19 showcase stream, revealing most of the stuff coming in that update, such as Xbalanque, cosmetics, and some new UI features that Kilgun mentioned. Probably the new lobby that they've been working on, I would imagine. They also mentioned that there potentially might be a playable but rough version of Osiris on the OB19 PTS for players to try and give feedback on. This will be similar to what they did a few updates back, where the main god for the update, Xbalanque, will basically be finished, but they might also have OB20's god Osiris in a playable but unfinished state. They didn't fully confirm this will be happening, but they're aiming to get him in if possible. Rocky, the lead programmer on the team, was on for today's show, so there was a fair amount of tech and programming related questions, with our first one being what spaghetti code issue from Smite 1 was the most annoying to deal with. And Rocky said it generally gets worse the further you go back in Smite 1's life, but there was one issue where Bellona, Jingchen, and some other god he couldn't remember were all inheriting changes from each other, so changing something on one of those gods would make changes to the others retroactively, which was very annoying to work around. Someone asked how hard Changa's rabbit would be to implement, and Rocky said it probably wouldn't actually be too hard. There's a lot of improvements in terms of making AI work in UE5, and the rabbit is one of the simpler pets in the game, and the new tools they have access to make things a bit easier to implement compared to Smite 1. He said they've been looking into a bunch of AI related stuff recently in terms of working up to the more complicated AI pets like Calder and Argus. Cthulhu was also brought up, and Rocky said he's easier in some areas and harder than others to implement. Most of the hard stuff is on the art side of things, as he has a lot of flashy FX and a large model. He said probably the hardest programming challenge for him would be the growing in size thing for his ultimate. Ponpon was in the chat and asked what the most annoying request he has given to Rocky to program is, and he said probably the whole active item system, as it went through a lot of iterations during the initial implementation. Performance and optimization was brought up by the chat, specifically in regards to performance degrading over the course of a match, and Rocky said it is something they're always working on, and they have basically a dedicated programmer who's pretty much always working exclusively on optimization. In regards to the degradation over time though, that's probably down to there being more going on later in the match as team fights get bigger and minion waves stack up and stuff like that. Someone asked if they're working on any aspects at the moment, and Kilgun said they are working on ones for Xbalanque and Osiris, with Osiris aspect potentially being playable as well when the PTS launches for OB19 on Wednesday. There was a question on if the next update will be for new players or for veterans, and Kilgun said they don't really do updates that way, they just do the things that they think the game needs the most at the moment, so it's usually a mix of the two things. Someone asked what the biggest fire they've had to put out was for Smite 2, and Rocky said probably the upgrade to UE 5.5. They had to pull basically every programmer together and decide if they were actually going to ship it or not, but eventually it worked out. Someone asked if they ever considered just deleting Morrigan because of her bugginess, and Rocky jokingly said yes, but followed up by saying that generally she's actually quite good at exposing more systemic issues with the game itself. For example, in early Smite 2 alpha before release, there were major issues with her transforming where the entire game would freeze for a while, and that exposed how unoptimized some of those calls were that she was doing, which I thought was interesting. Mori is a problem, but she also helps solve problems. Someone asked how many unreleased gods are currently playable in their internal tests, and Kilgun said 4 or 5 at the moment. In previous talks, they've also mentioned that a brand new god has been in their internal playtest as well. Rocky said that around the time of Janus being the next god, it was actually just 1 or 2, but they've managed to get ahead of things a bit with the reworked schedule for the rest of the year, as they are slightly easier gods, at least compared to Janus and Yorm that they were doing at the time, which lets them really cook with those gods and focus more on bug fixes or other gameplay systems, as less of programming's time is spent on making very complicated gods for the next updates. There was a question on the movement overhaul, and Rocky said they managed to get it working and feeling good in internal playtests, but often when you roll something out to thousands of players, you'll find a bunch of issues that will never be found in internal testing. They often get more data from the first hour of live release gameplay than they will get from weeks of internal playtesting. After all the issues, they decided to pull it as it would take a lot of work to clean up and make ready for release. Rocky said it will emerge one day, but right now their priorities are elsewhere. Someone asked if the lobby overhaul will make it into the update, and Kilgun said fingers crossed, they're finalizing things right now and are hoping it will make the update, but it's not guaranteed. If it doesn't ship in OB19 though, he said it definitely will for OB20. There was a question on Merc 3 and why it's so broken, and Rocky said it's due to the client prediction system that's in place for Smite 2. He moves faster than the server can keep up with, and so the client continues use simulating as if you hit the dash, but then the server comes back and says you actually missed that dash, and then it has to roll back to what the server says happened from what your client thought happened. Rocky said they are still looking into those issues in the background and are hoping to get some fixes out for it. Someone asked if there's any internal lingo that they use that the community might not know, and Kilgoon said that they use the terms in-hand and off-hand for basic attacks and abilities respectively, and that's because Smite 1 was originally a mod for Global Agenda, another high-res game where you had a class that had one weapon and one ability. The weapon was your in-hand and the ability was your off-hand, and so that's why Smite code refers to abilities as AO1, AO2, etc. That stands for ability offhand 1, ability offhand 2, and so on. You might have heard some old heads in Smite referring to basic attacks as in-hands, and that's where this comes from. Someone asked if they could add a way to auto-claim Ascension Pass rewards, and Kilgoon said possibly, but they also want players to know when they are getting things, so they would need to make it kind of obvious and make sure it's visible to players that things are being auto-claimed. There was a question on if the team had seen the original Smite 1 assault map being implemented into UE5 by a community member, and he said he has seen it and passed it along to the art team, but it was very much a partially implemented rough take and wouldn't work within Smite 2 the way it was. A lot more work would need to be done on that, and it could just be copy-pasted into Smite 2 and work flawlessly. Things are a lot more complicated than that in terms of map design. Kilgoon briefly mentioned that there will be a new Saga Vault in this next update, and it has a new cosmetic type that we haven't seen yet in Smite 2. And finally, someone asked what new Pantheon or God do Rocky and Kilgoon want to see, and Rocky said Robin Hood is one he's always wanted to add, which I think would be dope personally, and Kilgoon said he'd love some American folklore characters like Johnny Appleseed or Paul Bunyan. But that's everything discussed on today's Titan Talk. Don't forget to drop a like before you leave, and I'll catch you guys for another one later on. Have a great day, and peace out, you nerds.